But my philosophy is very simple. When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, say something, do something, get in trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble.
Strength and solidarity. The strength and solidarity. Divided is our nation, combating and fighting hatred. The mission, should you choose to accept it, is fighting racist. Psychology is just a space where we run in our simulations. We load you up with the tools, then we plug you into the matrix. So have a seat on the couch, now tell me your situation. Take a look in the mirror, be honest, just who you facing. Marginalized as a youth, what challenges were you faced with? Feeling you wasn't equal, told that you wouldn't make it. Your ID isn't real, got you constantly trying to fake it. Hiding behind masks in the closet till you can't take it. Getting harder to breathe, someone choking you on the pavement. Unspeakable violence attacking you cause you Asian. Accomplices we accomplish through collaboration, engaging, educating, evaluating one another, liberating the future of all our sisters and brothers, empowering, elevating all communities of color. Strength and solidarity. The strength and solidarity.
The Strength and Solidarity podcast is a conversational piece that invites scholars, community activists, leaders, artists, and entrepreneurs to discuss their work as accomplices in cultivating cross-racial ethnic solidarity. Hosted and produced by Pooja Mami Dana and Dr. Dana Deminari, our podcast team also includes our podcast interns, Alexis Rios and Petra Zabroga. The Strength and Solidarity podcast strives to engage, educate, evaluate, and empower communities of color one episode at a time. Our guest today features Gordon C. Nagayama Hall. He is an Emeritus Professor of Psychology at the University of Oregon. Dr. Hall received his Ph.D. in clinical psychology from Fuller Theological Seminary. He started his career as a psychologist at Western State Hospital in Washington State. Dr. Hall later was a professor of psychology at Kent State University and Penn State University. He served as the president of the American Psychological Association Division 45, Society for the Psychological Study of Culture, Ethnicity, and Race, and as president of the Asian American Psychological Association. He was editor of Cultural Diversity and Ethnic Minority Psychology. His textbook, Multicultural Psychology, is in its 4th edition. Dr. Hall's honors include the Stanley Sue Award for Distinguished Contributions to Diversity from the American Psychological Association, Division of Clinical Psychology, and the Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Psychological Association, Division 45. He received a presidential citation from the President of the American Psychological Association, Dr. Thema Bryant. His research interests are in culture and mental health, with a particular interest in Asian Americans. He currently has National Institute of Health funding to develop a problem-solving therapy app for Asian Americans. Dr. Hall is on the board of the DisOrient Asian American Film Festival of Oregon. His 4-year-old granddaughter, Emiko, says, "You're the best jiichan grandpa ever." Hi, Dr. Gaudi. Thank you so much for being here on our podcast today, Strength and Solidarity. So nice to have you here.
Thanks.
So we'd just like to begin by telling us about your journey in becoming a clinical psychologist.
Sure. Well, first of all, let me thank you for not expecting me to try to do the rap music at the beginning of your podcast. I don't think my family knew what a psychologist was. and maybe didn't even after I became a psychologist. So my grandparents on my maternal side immigrated from Japan in the early 1900s. And then on my father's side, they came from England a few years later. So my grandparents were immigrants, and being a psychologist wasn't something that was familiar to them. So I guess I started out wanting to be a minister, a Christian minister, or a physician. Those were roles that I was familiar with. We had some family friends who were physicians. My mother was a nurse. I think she hoped that I would become a real doctor, so to speak, or a medical doctor. And then I was in a church, Japanese Presbyterian church, where my pastor, Reverend Richard Nishioka, was a great mentor, leader, family friend. So I had role models that were physicians and ministers. So, I was in high school, and I took chemistry and physics. I thought, man, this is kind of challenging. And there weren't theology classes or anything like that. So, but I did take a psychology class when I was a senior in high school, and that sparked my interest in psychology. I had a great teacher. He was actually an undergraduate from the University of Washington. I still remember his name, Gary Fisher. He was a Jewish American that happened to be married to a Japanese American woman, and so he was connected to the Japanese American community, and that sparked my interest. We didn't learn about cultural aspects of psychology, but it was just interesting what psychology could do to help you learn about human behavior. And then also it was a helping field, so I could integrate my interests in helping people and do that in psychology without going to medical school. And that hope of being a minister was still there. And so I majored in psychology at the University of Washington, and I found out about Fuller Seminary that had a graduate school in clinical psychology, Ph.D. program that was APA approved, and they also had training in theology. So that's where I went to school, Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California, where I learned theology and psychology. But I quickly learned that I was more interested in psychology than theology, and that was basically my journey. It took a while, though, for me to find my footing as a psychologist. I was interested in grad school about Asian Americans and actually cultural adaptations of psychotherapy. But when I graduated in 1982, this was a very conservative time in the nation's history. And so my goal at the time was to work in a community mental health center and provide services. Well, the government started shutting down community mental health centers. So what I had studied and planned to do was not much of an option. So I did an internship at the University of Washington. I did some forensic work with sex offenders, and my early career was at a state hospital working with sex offenders. And there was no cultural element because almost every sex offender in that program was white. But a little bit after Western State Hospital, I moved to Kent State University in Ohio to continue this work on sexual aggression. And in 1993, I was elected president of APA Division 45. And I was, I had interest in culture, ethnicity, and race, but my work was on sexual aggression. And I had to give a presidential talk on culture, ethnicity, and race. And so a colleague of mine, Dick Swin, who later became president of APA, suggested that I integrate the two interests I had to look at sexual aggression among Asian Americans. And so that's what I did. I looked at cultural risk and protective factors associated with sexual aggression. That became my talk for Division 45. And then after 10 years at Kent State, I moved to Penn State University, where there were a number of top-notch psychotherapy researchers. And at that time, this is the early 2000s, I became interested in cultural adaptations of psychotherapy to make it more accessible and effective with people of color. And then I moved to University of Oregon. And so for the past 20 plus years, my work has been on cultural adaptations of psychotherapy. So that's an overview. So it was a circuitous path, and it took me a long time to get to the point where I was doing what I really wanted to do. So I had the ideas in graduate school, but I didn't get the opportunity to do this until many, many years later. So I guess perhaps the lesson is don't give up on a dream, even if you don't have immediate opportunities to pursue the dream.
Was that the turning point that led you to kind of switch up on your scholarship when you had that encouragement by Dr. Suen?
It was, and that did. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Edit this out. I have a 5-year-old or almost 5-year-old granddaughter who gave me this cold that I've been fighting for days. But yeah, that was a turning point, and getting involved in Division 45 was a turning point as well. So I would say I was kind of a spectator. I was teaching a graduate class at Kent State University called Psychology of Gender and Minorities. So what they did is this became sort of the repository for everything to do with diversity or gender. I mean, there's so much ground to cover in a course like that. But it did give me an opportunity to keep up with the literature. And so many of the people I admired in the field were part of Division 45. And so I got to meet many of these people. And the encouragement I got in Division 45 as president, and then the advice from Dick Swin to integrate my interests really helped my career take off. So, the work I was doing before then was, was interesting, but it wasn't really what I wanted to do. It happened that I was able to get a job working with sex offenders. I had some intellectual interest in it, but it wasn't, and I did a fair amount of research and clinical work, but it wasn't really what I had set out to do when I went to graduate school. So yes, meeting Dick Swin, and actually I became his campaign manager when he was elected president of APA, and he was president in 1999. And he was an inspiration to me and inspired me to work for him as his campaign manager and help him get elected.
That's great, because I know that you're also pretty active with Cynthia's.
Yeah, so that kind of became my second job. So and with Dick Swin, it took three tries to get him elected. So Dick had been on the board of directors of the American Psychological Association. He had been president of the Behavior Therapy Association. He was well published in behavior therapy, sports psychology. He developed this Swin-Lew acculturation, Asian American acculturation scale. So he'd done about everything you could do, and it took 3 tries for him to get elected. But he the first election he lost by about 35 votes. We thought we've got it. This is kind of a fluke. And then he ran against Marty Seligman, who was really famous, and he didn't win because Seligman was just well known for positive psychology, learned helplessness. And then finally, the third time around, we were able to win. And I felt badly because I felt responsible for him losing. And I'm thinking they didn't. The campaign manager for a losing campaign doesn't usually get another chance, but Dick felt obligated to the community to run, and he did, and so he got elected, and he was the first Asian American president of APA, and before him there hadn't been a president of color since the 1980s, and there was an indigenous person, Logan Wright, who was president. So there was about a 15-plus year hiatus until Dick became president, and then another 11 or 12-year hiatus until Melba Vasquez became president. So anyway, I did his campaign, and then and then actually I got interested in Barack Obama's campaign, and so I had some experience from Dick's campaign, so I worked on Obama's first campaign. And then Tama Bryant, who's the current president of APA, asked me to join her campaign team. And I wasn't the manager, but I had these different campaign experiences, so I did that. And then last year, I went to the APA council meeting and learned about the candidates that were running. And I wasn't that enthusiastic, and I knew about Cynthia. She had been on the board of directors. She'd been president of Division 45, which is Psychology of Women, and she'd been an academic and was in private practice, as well connected, and just a great leader and a wonderful person. I thought this person ought to run for president, and people had told her that before. But I said, I'll help you, and that's what I did to persuade Dick Swin to run too. He didn't want to run for president, and I think people had talked to him before and didn't seem very serious about helping him. So what I did, we were at a Division 45 midwinter meeting in Pasadena, and overnight, I came up with this list of people who would support Dick, and I said, "Look, you're a giant in the field. These are people who will support you. We could." And so then he knew that I meant business. And the same with Cynthia. I said, "I want you to run. You have a lot of support, and I'll organize your campaign. And I have some experience doing this." And so she did run, and she got elected this time, first time around without running more than once. So it just, with these folks, they're just, these AP presidents that I've known are just really special people. And it's a matter of getting people to learn about them that don't know about them. And they're just, they have such a strong message, and they're such strong leaders that they get a lot of support. So that became, I guess, sort of my hobby.
Have you
helping
ever
people
thought
get
about?
elected.
Have you ever thought about running yourself?
No, because I know what's involved, and I know the kind of people who are president. I retired in 2020, and I've had enough. And people have asked me that, but I was in academia for quite a while. And what my least liked activity was faculty meetings. And so being APA president is kind of like being sentenced to an endless faculty meeting where you're stuck. So I did, that was part of it. And I think these folks who've been elected that I've worked with really have a vision for APA, and didn't necessarily want to do the job, but were certainly capable of doing it. I don't, I haven't been on the board of directors. I have no interest in doing this. I'm happy to help someone who is capable and is a good candidate. So I'm not interested, and never have been.
Now you've talked about some of your leadership journey, especially in the Division 45. Were there any other leadership besides being a campaign manager and working in campaigns and being past president of Division 45 that you were involved in?
Sure. Well, so several years ago, I was on this panel with Jeff Mio, who's a past president of Division 45, and the late Jean Lao Chin, who was also a president of Division 45. And we were supposed to talk about leadership. And Jean had, she wrote a book on leadership. She knew a lot about it. Jeff and I just said, they asked us about how we got into leadership. I think the question you're asking me, we just said we did it out of necessity, and that's it. I mean, I've done these things because they needed me, basically. So I guess one of my earlier experiences of leadership was when I was 20 years old. I was elected as an elder of the Japanese Presbyterian Church. I'm 20 years old. It's like, how can you be an elder? Well, again, I think they wanted youth leadership, and I guess we're desperate in some ways. And so there I was. And then the same thing with Division 45. They were trying to, they rotate ethnicities of slates. And so they were looking for someone to run for president. And I had a friend, Maria Root, who was on the executive committee of Division 45. And she knew me from my Seattle days. And she said, you should run. And I had no experience with Division 45 in leadership. And I said, sure, I'll run. And so I got elected. And so I became a leader by circumstance again. And so I don't really have a theory of leadership or leadership style, anything like that. And in fact, a few years ago, when Alvin Alvarez was also a past president of Division 45 and AAPA, asked, he was forming his Leadership Development Institute, which is very effective and has had maybe you or others.
I'm a past LDI fellow.
Yeah, so that's a great program. So he wanted me to be part of that, and I thought, man, I said the same thing. I said, well, here's my philosophy. Be a good person, work hard, and get famous, and then you'll be a leader. And that's advice I've given to my students. Somewhat the get famous part is sort of tongue in cheek, but for me, leadership is treating people with respect, being a kind person, being a good person. To me, that's more important than anything else I've done. So if being a good person for me means being a good husband, a good father, now a good grandfather, a good friend, a good that to me is going to outlast any publications I have or any other accomplishments. And then working hard, I think, is important. I think that working hard and being a good person, it's a good combination, and gets you a good reputation. And then in my case, people asked me to be a leader, but I was not equipped to be a leader as you were, Don, or probably, I probably was less equipped than you are, Pooja, as well, because I just, I was working and kind of minding my own business, and then someone asked me to be a leader. So I'm not sure that's an answer to your question, but I think my leadership, to the extent that I had or have had leadership, is a matter of treating people well and working hard and gaining respect that way.
Were there any challenges in your leadership journey?
There's there have been. I've done some administrative work in the university as well. Those were most of where the challenges were. I think Division 4. I was also president of AAPA, and in AAPA in Division 45. Sure, there's some relatively minor challenges, but everybody's more or less on the same page. We have common goals, and I think our common goals outweighed whatever differences we had. I think there's these common goals of social justice and bringing to the fore the experiences of people of color, and I think to a person in AAPA and Division 45, those are our values, and so whatever differences we had were fairly minor, and so I've enjoyed those. University settings have been different. My leadership was as director of clinical training in a clinical psychology program, and then I was involved in the Center on Diversity and Community, which was a center that served the university and promoted diversity initiatives. There was pushback there. It'll come as no surprise to both of you that there are opponents of affirmative action and diversity efforts. So that's where the pushback came there. In my role as director of clinical training, I guess there was less pushback there. I was doing accreditation reports and things, so they were grateful for that. Although I guess in both roles, in my role as director of clinical training and in the Center on Diversity and Community, there's not a shared goal across the university. Maybe that's just the way universities work, where people are individuals and they have their own goals, and it's very decentralized. I understand that, but it made it hard to work at times when people were in opposition to what I was trying to do as a leader. So I felt much more willing to take on leadership roles in APA than in the universities I worked in.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned AAPA, because when Dr. Donna asked you that question, have you been in any other leadership positions? I know that you were like past president of AAPA, and I was like, if he doesn't say that, I'm going to mention it at some point. But, I think something that you said about like leadership earlier in this conversation really stood out to me, and is kind of also what's got me into leadership. Because there is a necessity for people of color to be in these spaces, or to kind of be the voice of, just even like other communities. And I think I've also had the very good fortune of having like lots of role models through AAPA, and seeing them be leaders, and then just elders just like you and like many others in AAPA whom I've heard so much about from my role models. So I guess my question is, as a young leader, what words of wisdom do you have for like young leaders getting into leadership that you had wished that you had known started out, and any words of wisdom you can pass down to us?
Sure. So about 10 years ago, there was a study of Asian American managers or administrators in science, engineering, and technology. These are academic leaders. And although Asian Americans were somewhat overrepresented in these fields, science, engineering, and technology, they were underrepresented as administrators. And what this study showed is that when an organization was failing or losing money, that was the time they tended to choose Asian American leaders. So basically, Asian Americans were seen as good leaders when there was some cleaning up to do to save the organization. When the organization was doing well, they preferred non-Asian leaders, and Asian American leaders didn't last long in these administrative positions and often left to do something else or go back to their regular job as a faculty member or whatever their regular job was. So I guess my advice to young leaders is to be careful what kind of situation you're getting into, and size up the situation and understand what's going on before you take a leadership position. So something similar happened to me. So several years ago, I was elected to be the leader of an organization. I'll be oblique here so as not to reveal.
We understand. Please, confidentiality.
Yeah. So I mean, I didn't ask to be the leader, and no one talked to me about this. No one said, we're going to rally around you, and we'd like you to lead this organization. And what was happening is that this organization was in disarray. There were some people that were very oppositional, and I think the people in the organization felt that I could deal with these persons because of who I am. But I had basically no support. I didn't ask to do this, so I refused. I said, I'm not going to do this. I don't feel capable of doing this, nor do I want to do this because of the situation that I was being placed in. It was kind of almost a setup to fail, similar to that study of Asian American administrators in organizations that were failing. So if it fails, you get blamed. If it succeeds, they move on to somebody else. So it was essentially being asked to clean up someone else's mess. And several years ago, a colleague of mine, an African-American colleague, was at a meeting, and there were white leaders who were asking the people of color to help them or to try to sort things out. And so my friend, this African-American, said that people of color have been cleaning up the houses of white people for centuries. It's time to clean your own house. So that was very powerful. And in terms of cleaning up, people are responsible for their own mess. I can't come in and clean it up. So for a young leader, you want to be sure that you know what you're being asked to do, what's expected of you, what are the criteria for success, and sorting that out. I think it can, be, very validating to think, oh, wow, this group wants me to be a leader. But then what does that mean? What are they expecting of you as a leader, and how are they going to treat you, and how are they going to support you? Are they going to use you as a punching bag, or are they going to blame you if things don't succeed? It's not all up to one person. And if they're making it, making success or failure all up to you, that's probably not the kind of leadership position to take. And I know both of you are, leaders are involved in leadership, but another piece of advice I would say is don't become a leader. I mean, in fact, that's advice that I got when I was untenured faculty member. Stay out of leadership and politics. I didn't, in university settings, I didn't become a leader until, until I was a full professor. And, I did it because I felt it was part of my responsibility. But I think as a junior person, you want to be careful about what leadership roles that you take. And as you've said, Pooja, you can influence an institution, and people of color ought to be in influential positions. At the same time, you don't want to sacrifice your career or your personal life or health to be a leader. I mean, that's not your responsibility to suffer for someone else's problem. So I guess, what I'm saying is be careful when you go into a leadership role and make sure you know what you're getting into and make sure that you have support. And, it's not always up to you. Someone else could do it if you can't.
No, I really appreciate you sharing that, because I'm also not going to take names. But when I first got asked to be in like a really just different leadership position, which came with more responsibilities, my dad's a businessman, and I talked to my father about like important decisions I'm going to make. And I remember being really excited and being like, oh, they asked me to be, this and this position. And my dad is like, don't get so excited. Asian man. He's like, they probably know that you can do the work and they see you can do the work, and like, be careful with what you're getting into. And, when you shared that with me here today and our listeners, it kind of reminded me of, that conversation I've had with him a few years ago. And, even when you said like, using your voice and things like that, anytime I give like keynotes or like even when I launched the podcast, he was like, like, be careful with what you're doing, because, at the end of the day, you need to think about your career and things like that. So I really appreciate you also sharing that perspective, because, at the end of the day, we are working in predominantly spaces where we don't see that many psychologists of color. And, we still have like a long time ahead of our career. And I really appreciate you bringing in that perspective to younger people who are getting into this, that, you also need to be very cognizant of what you're doing and how you're presenting yourself out there. So thank you.
I also think that with leadership, at least from my perspective, it's about making necessary trouble. That's been my motto. And I am sort of a reluctant leader. Usually I get asked, and because no one else would take that space. And you're right, in terms of really weighing out the pros and the cons, whether or not you can realistically do this job. And leadership is unpaid. That's an unpaid job. And oftentimes it's thankless, right? Because people would want to see concrete evidence that you're doing something. And most of the time as a leader, you're doing a lot of things behind the scenes that people do not see. But for me, it's about making that necessary trouble to do good for a community. And that's just how I see it.
No, that's an important point. I am glad that we have people in our field. And I'm glad that there's that Leadership Development Institute, because we do need leaders to be administrators and to get our voice there and have an impact and to try to challenge the status quo. So that, that's an important role. So I'm sort of, I don't mean to make light of that, but I think you need to weigh everything and decide, is this something that I can do, and do I have support to do it? And if not, you don't have to do it. Someone else can do it. And sometimes, as you said, Donna, that's been my role as a leader as well. I've done it out of necessity. No one else would do it. But then, you have to decide, is this something worthwhile, and can I make an impact here? Or is it just, kind of thankless work that's not going to really move the needle?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
I'm really happy both of you also, spoke about the Graduate Leadership Institute. Is that GLDI, right? Because I think something that I've just noticed in my many years of education, like through both my master's and now my PhD program, is graduate schools also don't really focus on leadership or kind of prepare us on how to, engage in that space if people are interested in. And if it wasn't for, AAPA, I wouldn't have even found my voice as a leader and understood how to navigate those nuances. So it's also nice that, even APA has like the minority fellowship program and things like that. So it's also really nice to have psychology associations kind of provide that for students leaders who are interested in engaging in leadership.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was part of the advisory committee for the minority fellowship program. Actually, it's been almost 20 years. And actually, I was the chair of the advisory committee again because no one else wanted to do it. But it was a good group of people. But that is a great program to support psychologists of color and help people who will be future leaders. And what I like about that program is that there's this community or a family of MFP fellows who support each other, and you make connections that help you, and you get confidence that you belong in this field. And as you said, Pooja, often in your institutions, you don't get that kind of support. So these programs are good in terms of preparing leaders, and we need leaders in the field. And I'm grateful to people who can do this. And my colleagues who've been president of APA have the patience to sit through those meetings and actually do something effective. And that's an important skill to have. And as I've said, I don't have a lot to say about that because I didn't necessarily want to become a leader and didn't get training and preparation to do it, nor do I feel like I'm qualified to help someone else train to be a leader.
Well, you definitely have like a lot of experience over the years. Otherwise, people wouldn't have also kept asking you. And whatever might be a necessity, you also just learn on the job. Hence, I'm learning in my journey. And is it safe to say, Dr. Gordy, since you didn't do the intro wrap, that if people are running for presidency, they can contact you for campaign managing?
Oh,
no, I'm retiring. I've had actually my good friend and colleague Deborah Kawahara is running for APA president this year. And what is great about this year is that students, graduate students who are members of APA can vote for the first time ever. So this is a chance for graduate students who actually have the benefit of voting. Graduate students pay dues, but haven't been able to vote until now. And I think Deborah is an excellent candidate in terms of student interest. She has been a faculty member and administrator at Alliant University for many, many years. I know her well. She's very, she's been on the board of directors. She's been president of APA Division 35, the Psychology of Women. So she's well qualified. And I think had she wanted to run for president a year ago, I probably would have managed her campaign. But I'm on her team, but I can't. I like doing this. It's exciting, and it's good to see people of color in the highest office of APA. I'm handing it off to other people.
Well, that's too bad, because I know you mentioned that you're sort of this reluctant leader, but you've been an effective leader as well. I just wanted to highlight that, and we do want to thank you as the new, younger, leadership are moving on up. They look up to you,
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, but I think perhaps my leadership involves advocating for others, and I feel best when I can support someone else, be part of a team, get people enthusiastic about someone who actually would be a good leader, or supporting someone who's trying to create some leadership initiative. So that, if that's leadership, maybe it is, but I feel that I'm better as a team member than the team leader. Not, I've had to do it. I mean, in my academic work, I've led grants and I've had students in a lab and so forth. And that's I can do that. But in terms of seeking to be a leader, that's not me. And I think I don't know if you're going to move to this yet, but in terms of cross-racial solidarity, that Cynthia de los Fuentes is Latina, and I'm Asian American, and she was just someone I wanted to support, and because she was capable, she's a woman of color that I thought would be a good leader, and she will be a good leader of APA. I also supported Tama Bryant, who's African American, and I was able to meet them because of Division 45. Division 45 is one of the few multi-ethnic organizations. And a few years ago, when Stanley Sue was president of Division 45, he said that Division 45 is one of the most effective multi-ethnic organizations that he knew of. And that's the case. So Division 45 has been great in terms of meeting people from different backgrounds and supporting them. Mm-hmm. And so I've been very privileged to meet the people I've met through Division 45 and to support Tama and Cynthia. I mean, it was an honor for me to be on their campaigns, and I'm very happy that they got elected. But, I just felt like this was something I could actually help do. And it'd be great to have an Asian American president. Debbie Kawahara is a Japanese American. I hope and, expect her to be elected. I'm helping her. But it was important for me to help my non-Asian colleagues too, because I feel that we're on the same team. We're part of a family. We're part of a community in psychology that is growing in size and influence.
Yeah. We definitely were going to bring that up. Thank you for reminding us. And it also really shows how cross-racial ethnic solidarity, and, the name of our podcast too, like strength and solidarity, of how there is strength in numbers, and we need to lift each other up. And it's amazing to just see how you've been able to do that through meeting people in Division 45 over the last few years in different roles, supporting them in their leadership journey. What are some other steps do you think we can take as a community to kind of increase, that solidarity and be better accomplices?
Yeah, I think it's thinking about what our common goals are. So as I was saying before, social justice, racial justice are common goals that we all have. And I think it's a matter of listening to people from other groups and studying, learning about their history and context, but getting to know people, having friends, having colleagues that are from different backgrounds, and really listening to them and finding out, what it means to walk in their shoes. So that's very important. And we do have a lot in common, and we have common goals. So, some of my, and that's not to say that there aren't differences that we have. And there are going to be those differences, but in my experience, there were so few people of color that we needed to be united. We needed to have strength in numbers, and we couldn't have infighting. We needed to have a united front. And most of the time that hasn't been such a challenge. Some of my colleagues who I guess aren't in my generation see disagreement as something that's positive. And I think it can be positive. You can, you want to respect different people's views, but I think if we're fighting, if there's infighting, that's going to reduce our our effectiveness. Not saying that people should just, not express their opinions or just be subservient to, leaders or older people or anything like that. I think we do need everybody's input, but I think we have a lot in common that we're fighting for. And I think to be effective, we need to figure out what those commonalities are and try to integrate diverse opinions. But at the end of the day, try to think about what do we have in common and what can we fight for together. Otherwise, if we get divided, we're less effective. And actually, Art Bloom was talking about that when you interviewed him, how those in power often try to pit different people of color
colonial
against
splitting.
each other. And I mean, that's certainly been a part of my experience. So Asian Americans were viewed as a model minority or honorary whites and pitted against other people of color, and often not seen as people who were people of color or actually committed to social justice. And that's not true. Sure, there's some people who aren't, who are trying to assimilate and who are Asian Americans and aren't as concerned about racial or social justice as others, but many of us are, and that pitting of one group against another can really weaken us. And you've probably heard of the oppression Olympics, who's had it worse and so forth. Well, I think every person of color has experienced oppression in different ways, and it's not necessarily the magnitude; it's the experience, and that's something we have in common: experiences of oppression. And I think we also have cultural experiences that set us apart from the mainstream, and our cultural experiences have not always been respected. So those, our culture, ethnicity, and race, name it Division 45. So our culture and then our ethnic and racial identities are common bonds. And I think we're still at a point, even though we're larger in number than we were when I started out, our influence is relatively small in terms of the whole field. And we're making inroads in terms of APA presidents and leadership in our ethnic associations, but we have a ways to go, and we still do need to work together to be effective.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And I completely also agree with you that each experience is subjective, but we do have a lot of common identities and experiences, through our cultures as well. And even in our cultural values, there are a lot of similarities in the larger cultures we're part of. So it's also important to understand how can we continue to support one another and be better accomplices and just raise each other up instead of bringing each other down.
Yeah. One group's oppression is another group's oppression.
Yeah, and that's what has been the case in Division 45. There's been much support across groups. I particularly felt this in the wake of anti-Asian violence that, it's been occurring for as long as Asian have been in the United States, but has been pronounced since COVID and the Atlanta shootings, and now these mass shootings in California. And some of my colleagues in Division 45 have reached out and supported. That means a lot. I mean, just knowing that they're thinking about me means a lot. And this kind of reminds me of a study I saw on prayer. So if you have a religious tradition, tradition sometimes you pray for other people. Well, prayer itself doesn't necessarily, in this study, prayer itself didn't necessarily make an impact on a person being prayed for unless they knew that they were being prayed for. So if you knew that someone was praying for you, it made you feel better. It gave you a boost. If someone's out there praying for you, you don't know about it, then there's not an effect. So that's similar to what I felt during these incidents of anti-Asian violence. People from different backgrounds just reaching out to me and telling me that they support me. That's been a lot, and maybe it isn't necessarily something practical that they've done to reduce the violence, but just knowing that there's this support has really helped me. A recent example of that was on the Division 45 listserv following these Michigan State University shootings. So people mentioned their colleagues at Michigan State, where they were thinking of them, and my friend Fred Leong had a response that was exactly my sentiment. But just knowing across groups that we have accomplices, that we have people that care about us, is a big boost, because often when we're isolated in work settings or social settings, there isn't somebody who cares about us, or we're the ones trying to communicate the importance of this, and often people don't, they might politely listen but not understand in a deep way. Whereas in Division 45, I feel that we all understand each other's oppression, as well as our cultures and our uniqueness, and how it's important to promote our friends and colleagues.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was actually, silently listening and reading through that email thread, and it's really nice to see that solidarity, people supporting Dr. Leong and other folks, our colleagues in Michigan State. I'd actually messaged Kevin because I know they're in the same area, but not in that school, but they're in, around the vicinity, and it's scary.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's there's not any place that's a safe haven anymore. It's not universities. It's not dance clubs. It's not church.
Schools.
It is frightening. I'm on the board of directors for the DisOrient Asian American Film Festival of Oregon, and we're about to hold our film festival next month. And one of our staff members at last night's meeting said, this is kind of an uncomfortable topic, but we probably ought to be thinking about security, in our film festival. And we actually had a hybrid festival last year, back in person for opening and closing films, and we kind of didn't think about that, but this is on the radar for some people. I think some people may not feel comfortable going to the festival just because of these, of anti-Asian violence, and others, may be concerned, once they get to the festival. So we're actually going to consult with the police department, and we don't want to scare people away. But on the other hand, at those dance studios at Monterey Park, they weren't, expecting some guy to come in there with a gun. And so, these are concerns that we have. Is there any place that's safe? And so this is why we do need cross-ethnic solidarity and accomplices who are going to speak out for us and look out for each other. And So more than ever, we need, this cross-ethnic solidarity and accomplices across groups.
Yeah, I remember when I moved to this country 7 years ago, and I was very young then, and the Pulse Night shooting club in Florida had happened, and we had a group therapy class, and we were processing that in class, and one of my classmates kind of shared how when she enters public spaces, whether it's transport or large spaces, she always looks at the exit sign first, to kind of figure out if something happens, how can she leave? And, she hadn't said that. Like, I would have never thought of that because, there's violence that happens in India, but not so often with the gun violence that kind of happens here in the United States. And even though that was 7 years ago, that's something I still think about even till today, no matter where I am. I'm like, okay, how do I exit from here? Where is the exit? And it's just really sad how, we're seeing so much of this. 2 days ago, we met Dr. Gigi just the day after the shootings. And it's just been so much of it. And thank you for bringing light about that and how, I really appreciate how you're showing us that cross-racial ethnic solidarity can be done in so many ways. And that's a really good example to show something that we're dealing with in real time with many communities currently.
Yeah.
Well, we don't want to take more of your time, and it has been such an honor to just finally meet you and see you, because I've seen you all over. I've seen you at AAPA actually. The first time I attended, I was too afraid to come and talk to you. And I have obviously heard so much about you through so many people I know in AAPA, and just so grateful that you made time for us. And, thank you so much for everything that you've done. And I've actually read some of your journal articles in my intercultural awareness development class. And so I've known about your work through my MFT program. And then now I'm teaching that class and we are still using your articles. So it's kind of nice to, tell my students that, hey, I know who that is. And he was past president of AAPA and, Division 45. And just so grateful for everything that you've done. Thank you so much for everything that you've done in the field and, for paving the way for our generation. So just wanted to say thank you.
Yeah. And also, by the way, your multicultural psychology book, I am looking into that because I do teach multicultural psychology. So I really love how you organize the chapters. So I'm very excited to read that. And like Pooja, I've heard of you, and it's because of you, by the way, I'm going to give you credit for this. It's the reason why I was really into Cynthia. I'm like, oh, I'm really curious now. So I read much about it because you're very persistent in our listservs. And I really appreciate that.
Well, but I helped her, but I can't, ultimately was she, her qualifications of one. Some people didn't actually hear from me and just read about who she was or heard her speak and thought, wow, she's great. So that's ultimately what I was just sort of pointing the way. And sure, I helped her, but she probably, quite honestly, she probably could have won without me. I had a role, but it's the candidate that we want to point to. But I appreciate both of you having me on this podcast. It's an honor, and I'm always happy to be part of Division 45. It's nice that you're, thinking of me. And if you give me the lyrics of that rap song, maybe I'll try to learn them, and you can have me on another time, and I'll try to do it.
I would love to hear you rap, actually.
I definitely will send you the lyrics, and definitely if you're coming to APA this year, then I can just record you in person
at the convention. I would love that.
Yeah, my adult children would be embarrassed, so I'll spare them.
No,
love it.
Yeah, thank you.
Even my granddaughter might be embarrassed.
I don't think so. I think you'd be good at it. I have faith.
Well, thank you so much again. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to our podcast today. We hope you enjoyed the episode. For more information about today's guests and their social media links, you can click on the description links of the episode. Pooja Mami Dana and Dr. Donna Demanarig host this podcast. Our podcast team includes our podcast interns, Alexis Rios from the University of North Texas in Denton, Texas, and Petra Zadroga from Wheaton College in Norton, Massachusetts. We also want to acknowledge our production team, David DeVito and Rachel Sheffer.
If you would like to know more about us or to watch video clips of this interview, then follow us on Instagram at APADiv45_Presidential Task Force, on Twitter at APADiv45_Coakley, or on YouTube and Facebook at Dr. Kevin Coakley, APA Division 45 Presidential Task Force.
Strength and solidarity. The strength and solidarity.